That's the idea. Call to order. Has everybody seen the minutes from our March 2026 meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Any comments, any changes, any accolades? No? I'm all set, so. Motion to approve the minutes from March 2026.
Seconded.
No, I can't make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, John makes the motion. Bud, second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, public comment announcements, agenda item 3. Chip, do you want to speak?
Okay.
Come up to the table, please. Or podium or table, and tell us your name and your address and why you're here. I know why you're here, but.
I know. Lemoyne, 142 Port Nimicut. Hear about the landing. I know this isn't a
Powwow.
big thing about tonight, about Paul Wall Landing, but just concerned about where it would be going. And my concerns, you know, that if everybody knows the whole picture of it, you know.
How long have you been living near Powell, near on Powell?
54 years myself.
Okay, so you've been there probably the longest of anybody I know on.
Yep. I watch it every day.
Yep, I know. So, hi Derek, how are you?
Hello.
You want an agenda?
Yeah, please.
Um,
So I've showed you pictures of it at
Yes.
that low tide.
Did I send those pictures to you? Did I send a picture to you guys?
I didn't see them.
No, I'll send it to you. It's a,
So at dead low tide, I mean, can't get out of the pond. Of course, you gotta wait an hour to get out of the pond after low water. So, and of course, then after the bulkhead going towards the bay, it's narrowed in, so, I mean, I don't even think one boat can get in, except the orchids seem to manage it. That's about all, you know, so,
well, they're running shallow draft
What
boat.
are you suggesting, that we dredge it?
well, it definitely needs to be dredged from at least the rock to the pond.
But you had other points we talked.
Oh, I have other points.
Well, so, just so you know, so at our last meeting, I told you, we had a extensive, at least 1 hour conversation with Ted Keon, and he brought a lot of really great points to the table, and it was really great, it was really informative talk. We had aerial photographs, the whole thing.
Yep.
So I did send an email to the Board of Selectmen, Select Board,
Yep.
to proposal for a study/plan. So at least it's been sent to them. I haven't heard any response yet, but we'll see what happens.
Well, there's 4 things that need to be done.
Okay, I'm just saying, so that's where we're at this so far, but we're certainly welcome to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
And we have it on a future agenda item to discuss more about it. So, but you're here, so please speak up.
Well, the bulkhead needs to be replaced.
Yep.
For starters, I believe would be going in an order. And the landing being underwater at most high tides,
Parking lot,
parking lot should be raised if
it
possible.
is right at marsh level, yep, we know that.
Yeah, it's at marsh level or below right now.
Okay,
The ramp obviously is broken all up and needs to be
okay.
dealt with. And of course, the dredging.
So there's more issues than just one.
Well, there's 4 main issues.
We approached just the dredging because that seemed as the most, maybe the most easiest or the first thing that would be easier to tackle, I guess. But it's definitely a concern, so.
But doing one and not the others, it would be like, you know.
Okay.
Anyway, you know.
Do you want to head our steering committee? We don't have one yet, but we might.
As long as it gets the attention and
Okay,
it deserves. you
Okay.
know, and needs. Anyway, I think the last time it was worked on was 87,
okay.
fall of 87. So,
We built the fire station.
Yeah. So we're
How long ago?
same, rotation.
so that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
We're gonna need it. Thanks, Chip. See ya.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Okay, agenda item number 4, reappointment of committee members. We have 2 members who are terming out in June. One is Bill Amru, the other is John Quigley. I asked both if they were interested in coming back, because even though their 2-year term, their 2-term limit is up, there have been extenuating circumstances in the past where people can come back on, but they expressed interest in not coming back right away, so that's fine, so. So we're going to be, we'll need members. So we have, I think we have 8 members out of 9. So we're missing 1 alternate.
Missing 2 tonight.
No, but I mean, as far as, we have 8 members on the committee. We can have up to 9. 7 regular members and 2 alternates. So right now we have 7 members, 1 alternate. We can always use a second alternate, but once we lose those 2, we'll be down 3 members. So if you know anybody in the community, you want to give them a little nudge and say, hey, interested in the committee, we'd like to have some, maybe get some interest from who knows where, anywhere, so, as long as they're an Orleans resident, so. All right? So then, after June, we're going to be naming a new chair and vice chair. So if anybody's interested in taking my position, please jump right ahead and let me know. You can tell me right now, it'd be great. But if you're interested in taking the chair, please let me know. If so, I do not give up my gavel. I'm sorry. It's from 1959, the year I was born. You can't have it. So. All right. So that's coming up. Agenda item number 5, Pleasant Bay Study, presented by a presentation by Owen Nichols, Center for Coastal Studies. Owen, you're here. Would you like to come right up and join our conversation?
Yeah, can I go over there?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me here. Sorry, I had to decline a couple of previous invitations. I'm a brand new dad, and honestly, this is the latest I think I've been out of the house so far without my son. And this is probably the biggest number of people I've talked to at once in a long time. Just kind of easing back into work. But that said, the project that we're doing now in Pleasant Bay, I'll just give you a little background here, then I'll show you a couple slides. But it's kind of a rehash of some work we did in 2015, 16, and 17. The Friends of Pleasant Bay have funded another study that's basically a year, it'll actually be about a year and a half of survey work in Pleasant Bay. One of the reasons I'm really happy to be here today is not to present results of that work, because it's just starting, but to really gain your feedback and insights on things we should be looking at, because we're in a stage in our study where we can we can adjust the sampling framework. We're trying to do things that are repeat what we did 10 years ago, but we also have opportunities to piggyback new studies on. So this is a great time to get feedback from you all, because we're just starting to ramp up our project now. And to that end, we've actually already incorporated things that I've heard in past meetings of this committee. For example, one of your last meetings, we talked a little bit about looking at low oxygen areas in Pleasant Bay. So now we're doing vertical casts from the research boat that run from the surface to the bottom to look at oxygen concentrations.
Vertical casts?
Yeah, so we lower an instrument from the surface all the way to the bottom, and it measures oxygen, temperature, salinity, all these things in the water column. And we're going to make sure we get discrete samples from right near the bottom. And that's based on feedback we heard in these meetings a couple of years ago. Looking at some patches of bottom in the bay, in Big Bay especially, where the bottom's kind of sour, and see if we can look at oxygen levels at the surface and hopefully in the sediment too. That's something we want to try to do this year. But I guess for context, especially for those folks who might not have seen this, I'll run through just a little bit of what we did 10 years ago, so you just have a general sense of what we're doing out there now. These slides are from a workshop that took place in 2022. And it was kind of an overall workshop focused on Pleasant Bay research conducted by all kinds of organizations, the towns, the Park Service, Coastal Studies, Audubon, state, you name it. And I've got, I sent this to Craig, and I'm sure he can forward it to you all after, but I'll leave some copies here. These are, go back to the microphone. Those are, that's just a little poster about that workshop that was held just a few years ago. There's little QR codes on there you can scan, and it'll take you to the website where the full report is, or you can just, the URL is written on there too. So you're welcome to take those with you. And I sent an electronic copy of it to Craig to forward as well. And there's a link to some of our reports. But Yeah, so that is a document that you might want to look at just to get a sense of kind of what we're focusing on now. You know, a lot of the outcomes of that 2022 workshop were, you know, there's a lot of organizations out there doing research. We want to kind of combine the resources that we have already, look at merging some of the data sets. You know, there are a lot of folks that collect water quality. There's a lot of folks looking at eelgrass, you know, different sort of habitat metrics. There's also a lot of conservation work being done out there. You know, the recent preservation of Simpson Island, habitat restoration going on in places like Frostfish Creek, Muddy Creek, you know, places like that. So kind of measuring the effects of some of the habitat restoration work that's been done. You know, those are the kinds of things we want to be doing out there. So I'll just quickly show you a couple of slides from the work that we did. And remember, this is work that was done a decade ago. So I'll just run through a couple slides here. Let's see. Oh, good. All right. We don't need the backstory. You all know where Pleasant Bay is.
Was that a flounder dredge?
That was.
Inshore flounder, who was that, do you know?
I'm not sure. That's from a report from the 1960s that I'll talk about just briefly. I don't know who that is in the photo. I've paired it up with some logbooks from Brian Gibbons. But the study that was done in the 1960s, I think it was 65, 66, by the State Division of Marine Fisheries, provided kind of the first overall, like really comprehensive survey of Pleasant Bay, and they really focused on things like blackbacks, like winter flounder, shellfish resources, you know, things that we eat mostly. But it was also a really nice baseline, even though it was quite a number of decades ago. You know, what lives in Pleasant Bay and where. Now, since then, you know, one of the recommendations of the report was we should do this every 10 years. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the state's budget to do that work, so it really was not repeated for a very long time. The Friends of Pleasant Bay took interest in doing a larger scale survey of the system back in the middle of the last decade, and they really stepped up with some funding and support and helped us basically redo much of the study that was done in the 1960s, adding in some very specific elements and tying it in with things like seal distribution and benthic habitat mapping that was also being funded by the Park Service. So we had a really nice opportunity to kind of pull data together. That was all pulled into a large-scale report, which is in the information that Craig has. Skip some of this backstory here. Already said that stuff, but I do want to just show you what we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and what we're going to do again in the coming year and a half or so. One of the things we did is set these passive collectors out. They're basically flat lobster traps full of rocks. What they do is create a miniature artificial reef, and these aggregate a lot of critters. They're meant to study juvenile lobster distribution, so we were looking at lobster settlement in Pleasant Bay. This same tool is used up and down the East Coast from Rhode Island all the way up to Nova Scotia to measure lobster settlement when baby lobsters settle out of the plankton and look for a place to live on the bottom. We also did seine sampling. This is straight out of the work that was done in the 1960s, doing replicate methods. We do this at a couple different spots in the bay, Pawa Point, and also up in Meeting House Pond. And this was also done in the 1960s. And we do this same method along with some of the other methods that you'll see. Since we started in Pleasant Bay 10 years ago, we've now done a lot of these same sampling methods in Nauset Harbor, Wellfleet Harbor, Barnstable Harbor. So what's really cool about this study is we'll now be able to compare kind of biodiversity and things like that with some of the other harbor systems around Cape Cod. The tools that we use to go out and sample in deeper water, this is at the time the pride of our fleet, the research vessel Shackleton. We've updated our vessel since then, but same idea, small open skiff set up for shallow water work. We use a lot of the tools that you all may be familiar with. Lightweight commercial bay scallop dredge, an otter trawl. This is basically just a 30-foot sweep shrimp net, Wilcox net, modified for fish survey work. We use ventless lobster traps, basically a commercial lobster trap, kind of a tiny one, but with very small mesh and no escape vent.
How long do they soak?
It depends on, a lot of times we'll soak them for a week. Depends on how crabby everything is, but we'll do
bait them?
anywhere from a 3 or 4 day soak to a week soak.
You bait them?
We do. We also fish, we use, I use river herring for bait. And we get it from Division of Marine Fisheries after they do their gonad sampling. Every once in a while, they do their freezer clean out, and I have a special herring freezer at the office just for that stuff's like lobster crack. But science. All right. The other thing that we do now is use small eel traps for sampling. We don't bait those, but we soak those for just a couple days, and we're doing that kind of all around Pleasant Bay. That's kind of a new method that we've started. We started doing that in Nauset. It's a great way to consistently sample green crabs in a standardized way. Green crabs are gaining a lot of interest across the county, across the state. And so we've started sampling in a way that's consistent with what the town of Wellfleet was doing for their eradication program, what other towns are looking at doing. So we can circle back to that, but it is a nice systematic way of kind of comparing, again, what we see in Nauset versus what we see in Barnstable Harbor versus what we see in Pleasant Bay. Some results from the 10 years ago study. We set out looking for baby lobsters with those settlement collectors. We did find some. We actually had the highest lobster settlement per square meter in Massachusetts at the time, which was pretty cool. Granted, we're putting an artificial reef in a salt marsh area. We might get some reef effects when you set a gear like that, but it's consistent with what fishermen have told me for years, which is that there are a lot of baby lobsters in places like Pleasant Bay. That was inspired by Charlie Beggs years ago, who, when he was pulling moorings, was telling me that he was finding baby lobsters on his moorings. And so, sure enough, we set those little reefs out there in some of those areas and came up with a lot of baby lobsters. We also saw a lot of tropical fish, which was kind of cool. Really kind of highlighted how many small tropicals we see up here in these latitudes now. And I say now, I mean, there's records of some of these species from 100 years ago. So this is not, sky is falling, climate is changing so fast kind of scenario, but it is a good indicator of the variability of our climate. Just because we see a spot fin butterfly fish doesn't mean it's climate change exactly, but the frequency with which we see these things, again, can also be an artifact of we're looking more and we're writing it down and taking pictures with our phones now, which we didn't used to do 100 years ago. But we are seeing, I think, more of these juvenile fish and more species diversity. That's a snowy grouper and a spot fin butterfly fish there on the right.
Cool.
So that's another interesting reason to set those collectors out, not just to look for lobsters. It is a unique opportunity because we'll compare the results of our lobster work that we're going to do again this year with what we're seeing offshore, and we're going to be doing some work with other lobster researchers to kind of nest what we see in Pleasant Bay in the bigger picture of when and where lobsters go around the Gulf of Maine, and particularly off the Outer Cape. I digress. Back to sampling, seine sampling in particular. Lots of forage fish. It's a bait seine. It's a 60-foot commercial bait net. It's a pretty fishy net. We catch a lot. Just as an example, we got almost 3,000 silver sides in a single set. We're working a lot faster to get those fish back in the water. If they don't make it back into the water, they go to wild care to feed the birds in the wintertime. But if anybody wants some chubs, let me know. As far as what we see in the different habitats, as you'd expect, lots of species diversity. This is one of my favorite spots to sample. This is right off of Pawa, tomcod, bay scallops, lumpfish, lots of species diversity there. This is kind of eelgrass, sand, and macroalgae habitat. Lots of crustacean life out there, spider crabs, blue crabs. When you get down into places like Crow's Pond and some of these coastal ponds, it's interesting. We do have a lot of anoxic sediment in the bottom in places like this, big mats of sea squirts over just black mayonnaise, anoxic sediment. That's one of the places where we saw squid eggs, but unfortunately the eggs themselves were dead or dying due to the anoxic conditions on the bottom. Lots of golf balls in there, unsurprisingly. And that's also a place where we saw on the bottom right, those are seaboard gobies. Those are funny little fish. They're kind of cryptic. Pleasant Bay and Nauset Harbor are kind of the northernmost range of these critters that we know of, but because they hide in beer cans and empty shells and things like that, they probably exist quite a bit further north. This is one of the first places we were able to conclusively document them here on the Cape. They probably live everywhere. It's also a unique opportunity when you get into the harbor proper to look at more open water habitat, some of the sand habitat near the inlet, lots of sort of ephemeral mussel beds that shift around. That was the place where we saw some of the most blackbacks, winter flounder, and more sort of open water species like sand eels and things like that. and of course, lots of crustaceans. That's where you start getting into rock crab country as you set gear closer to the mouth of the system. Lots of rock crabs there. To summarize, and again, these reports are available online, but we caught a lot of critters. We were able to sample throughout most of the year. We saw patterns of abundance, kind of what took place when, in, broadly similar to what we saw in the 1960s. There were some things to note in terms of species life stage. For example, in the 1960s, there were a lot of adult winter flounder in there. When we did our study, we really only found small fish. That could be an artifact of our sampling methods, but we used the same gear at the same speed as the state did in the 1960s. And I think a lot of folks who spend time on the water would say there aren't too many big blackbacks in these places, although I would argue that maybe they're coming back now based on what we're seeing offshore. So I'm excited to get out and test the gear in there again. The fish on the right is actually sea-run Atlantic herring. Those aren't river herring. Those are a saltwater species that come into our bays and estuaries when they're tiny and use it as a nursery, but they actually spawn out on Georges Bank. And we often see these in the coastal ponds, places like Lonnie's and things like that in the spring. So that's something we like to see. The bay is an important habitat for juveniles of a lot of species. You have critters like longfin squid that spend their entire life history, and you might get all life stages in the bay, even though they move in and out, but they do come in to spawn. So it's nice to see that it is habitat for a lot of different creatures. One of the biggest things to come out of the work that we've done 10 years ago and we do since then is that, we really need to be monitoring these places more often than every 50 years, probably more often than every 10 years. But what this kind of work does, now that we're going to go back and kind of revisit some of the work that we did in the 1960s, is it gives us an opportunity to think about what we should be looking at more frequently over a longer period of time. In other words, we don't need to measure every single thing every year, but maybe there's some things that we really need to look at consistently in space and time, certain species, certain relationships between species, certain habitats that are worth monitoring. And another thing that we've learned in the last decade, is how many other folks are working out there. So we're thinking about ways to kind of incorporate more of the other work that's being done. Pleasant Bay Alliance leads a great water quality monitoring program out there. There's seagrass work being done on the eelgrass beds. There's all of this habitat restoration work going on. So there's a lot of really unique opportunities, I think, to kind of leverage work that's being done by other partners and get a much more robust understanding of the system. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We did do some fairly focused shellfish studies in there. Let's see if I can get you, let's see, where are we? I'm not going to give a long thing on this, but just to summarize some of the things that we did before that we could do again if there was interest. I'll just show you the pictures because it's a pretty dense technical report. We did go out and do dredge surveys, but really focused on mussel habitat, scallop habitat. We did some quahog dredge surveys, working from Chris Viprino's little dragger a few years ago. Lots of fun seeing all the binoculars lined up at the landings while we were out there dredging in Pleasant Bay. And we also did quadrat surveys looking at seed, looking at steamer clams, quahog seed. I'm actually excited to go back out there and do this again because we have a new visitor, maybe full-time resident in Pleasant Bay, which is the Manila clam. It's a Pacific species that showed up here. I know some of you have seen it. Phil's collected a lot of them in their day-to-day. But that's a species that we now know has been taken from Pleasant Bay, and we're still working on understanding where exactly they came from. But we've seen them around several harbors in Cape Cod. There's a lot of them up in Boston as well. So we're kind of excited to go out and repeat some of these same systematic surveys. We also mapped the spatial extent of some of the mussel beds that were out there. These are kind of ephemeral beds that kind of come and go. They move, they disappear. A lot of folks wonder why that happens. We know we have ducks, we know we have draggers, we have a few different things that can be responsible, but a lot of us are still kind of scratching our heads, including some of the fishermen I've worked with out there, as to what happens to these animals over the wintertime, because sometimes they do just disappear. That's sort of the long and short of it. I don't want to spend too much time talking about what we did because we're about to go do more, and I'd rather hear from you all what you all think is useful for us to be doing out there, because we do have time to work more into the project. We're going to be out there a few days a month at a minimum, year-round, and if we have something to focus on in addition to kind of the basic sampling you saw there, we're happy to try to work it into the study. We don't do this work for the sake of doing it. We do it because it matters to the community, hopefully, and we want to make sure it's as useful as possible. So, happy to take questions, ideas, feedback, anything.
Curious about your clam study. I see you had a picture of the clam boxes. So you're putting seed in the boxes and checking what?
So this was, sorry, I should have explained
okay.
a little more detail what we were doing. So these were just sampling what's there. So we were doing, we just basically use a very standardized method. Like, we're scientists, we suck at clamming, but we're good at measuring what lives in a quarter square meter with screens and sieves and things like that. What is nice about this is it's really replicable, and it's, you can do it in a way that you can repeat year after year in a standardized way. And it's similar to what some of the different shellfish departments do, and some of the other organizations like Cooperative Extension. You can take our apples and match them to apples collected by other organizations because you do have a standardized index of critters per unit area. That's a little different than what some other folks have done. The enclosure or exclosures that the Cooperative Extension did to look at predation on quahogs, for example, that's a little bit different, where you're actually planting things or putting a cage over something that's already out there and seeing what happens to them.
So you're sampling wild sample.
Exactly.
That's good. Town of Orleans has been doing some research in Pleasant Bay with planting seeds.
Yeah, and when we did this a decade ago, we talked to Nate about, and we did focus on areas that I think Nate identified as places where you wanted to kind of know what was happening out there and what was persisting. So that's the kind of thing where we could go back and do that again if that's of interest, if there's new spots. And I'm happy to hear from folks after tonight too. If you noodle on this for a day or two, send me an email or reach out through the chair. But yeah, happy to take feedback.
What's the other pesky crab that's around that eats marsh grass? What's that called?
So we have the purple-backed marsh crab is one to think about, and then we have the Asian shore crabs. That's one of these interesting things. We're getting more and more interested in green crabs, and there's a big push to harvest them, to extirpate them from a lot of areas. We recognize they're an invasive species. One thing we're always thinking about is the ecology, and as we work to remove the creatures, as we work to figure out how many there are and when and where they are, it's really important to note what they're eating and what's eating them. Green crabs are an invasive, but they're also a fairly well-established invasive. It's possible that they may hold populations of some of the other destructive invasive species in check as well, like purple-back marsh crabs. There's at least one study that shows that green crabs actually can exhibit or exert predation pressure on the marsh crabs and keep them from doing more damage. So we're starting to do a little bit of diet work. We've been working with some folks up at University of New Hampshire, where they have a genetics lab. We'll take some crabs, put them in the freezer. They'll dissect them, pull the stomachs out, and run DNA on the goo that's in the stomach. I've tried identifying what a crab ate from its stomach contents, and there's not a lot of hard parts or things in there that are easily identifiable. But we can look at the DNA. We did a preliminary study in Nauset Harbor a few years ago. They eat a lot of different things. It's basically just looking at diversity of diet now, but I think we can start dialing in and looking more at shellfish species in particular, looking for other crustaceans now that we have a sense of what they might be eating. That work still has a long way to go. I think DNA-based methods have a lot of promise, but it's only as good as the library of DNA samples that you already have. If you don't have a good sample from the town, you're not going to find the killer kind of thing. So that's we're still working on that. We need to continue improving the libraries for environmental DNA work.
So the green crab there's a market for it for consumption. There's also a great market for bait. I mean, these guys they're shipping them all over, certainly down south for tautog and stuff. But the other crabs are I'm concerned about them because they eat the grass.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe, was Ted mentioning it back in March that one of the ways to get rid of them was to cover the grass with sand.
Mm-hmm.
The grass would survive, but the crabs suffocate.
That's Steve Smith's work at the Park Service, and he could certainly speak to that better than I could.
I'm just curious.
But yeah, no, that Steve Smith at National Park Service has really been focusing on marsh crabs and looking at ways to mitigate, crab damage to the marsh. Green crabs are also noted to damage eelgrass beds. They don't necessarily eat the grass, but they disturb the beds and rip up the grass and things like that. So So that's another thing that we're looking at. And it's hard to sort of quantify the effect. You know, you're thinking about like weighing the benefits, relative benefits of these species, you know, and what we want to be most concerned about. So we're working with some of the other folks who are trying to harvest green crabs and just collecting data along with those harvests. So we try to understand what the ecological implications are. I think there's probably plenty of green crabs to go around right now.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the other type of herring. What was it called?
Atlantic herring or sea herring. Yeah, so they're not an anadromous species. In other words, they don't go upstream to spawn. They don't go into our freshwater ponds, but they will come in from offshore when they're little. You know, the larvae will.
That's the ocean herring?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Because
Also great bait.
I see them in the cove sometimes. I mean, literally from Mill Pond all the way to the town cove by the billions in April, when you wouldn't expect to see, like, you're looking for bunk or whatever, but there's definitely some kind of herring. Those are sea herring, I think, huh?
Well, there's shad.
Yeah.
There's shad going on.
No, not shad. I mean, I've seen sure, there's plenty of hickory shad, no doubt about it. We have Atlantics too. But these are definitely a small herring, so that must be the ocean.
Could
herring.
well be. Yeah, I mean that's the time of year we see them is spring.
I've seen them for 30 years, I haven't seen them. I mean, by the billions.
How big?
About 4 inches, 3 inches.
Yep, that may well be sea herring. And one of the tells is like if you seine some of them up, you know, you'll see it's not just the fish that are fully sort of silver, but you get those little tiny ones that are kind of like translucent. If you
Yeah.
can see through them like that, like a silver side,
Silver side, yeah.
that's most likely sea run herring.
These are all between like 3 and 5 inches.
Yeah, hard telling, not knowing, but
Yeah,
you know that would make sense.
interesting.
Hey, do you find a lot of toadfish in Pleasant Bay?
You know, not as many as I'd expect to find. I'm trying to remember if we saw any 10 years ago. I know historically there were a lot. You know, we find a lot of sculpins and a lot of other sort of their cousins, but I don't recall seeing a ton of toadfish, and I think I was kind of surprised by that.
I had one in one of my boxes, one of my grow boxes for a couple of years.
They're cool fish.
And, well, what I understand about them is they eat crabs, right?
Yeah, yes, they
I
do.
read stuff
Yep.
about other aquaculturists, like down south, they actually keep toadfish in their nursery boxes.
That's cool.
Eliminate the crabs.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Is it a native species to Pleasant Bay?
Yeah, no, there's records of them there for sure.
We used to catch them floundering all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, they should be around. I don't know if they're, you know, how many there are now relative to what there used to be, but I think I was kind of surprised we didn't catch more of them. You know, one thing I'd be interested in knowing too is, you know, the cunner that we see out there, they love structure. And I wonder if they eat the small crabs too. Be interesting to look at their diet because they certainly eat lobster eggs offshore and we're kind of curious what they eat inside.
Could it be a possible mitigation thing for the crabs?
I wonder, you know, I mean, I don't know how you'd sort of, you know, could start toadfish ranching, I suppose. But,
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I love stuff like this because that's, you know, that's a great question. You know, it's you know, up in New Hampshire, they're experimenting with some of these multi-trophic aquaculture projects. And one of the things they do is they ranch lumpfish and put them in there because the lumpfish eat the lice off the salmon. So yeah.
What?
Salmon,
Oh,
or
oh,
not
okay.
salmon, sorry, steelhead. Steelhead trout.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they bring the lumpfish in just to eat the lice off them.
Interesting.
Oh, and what about black sea bass?
We saw some 10 years ago. We've been seeing them in Nauset. I'm interested to see what we see out there this year compared to what we saw 10 years ago. So we did see some anytime we put any kind of structure down. You know, the eel traps are great at catching them, things like those lobster settlement collectors. So it'll be interesting to see. We started seeing them in Salt Pond in Eastham a few years ago, and you know those really warm winters, we saw a lot of them. The following spring, you know, last couple of years we've seen a little less. So I'm kind of interested to see what we see now is when they would show up in Salt Pond. So
Juvenile?
yeah, all small stuff, as
Yeah,
big
yeah.
as can fit into an eel trap. But I also kind of want to put some bigger traps down too.
Yeah. I found a couple of, 2 yellow jacks about 15 years ago in Nauset Marsh, up on Priscilla Flat. I was clamming, like, well, it's a couple things zipping around in the shallow water that they're snappers. I chased them down, like, those are not snappers, they're yellow jack. Pretty cool, you know? They're small, but they're pretty impressive, you know, they're like cute little buggers, you know?
Yeah, the more we look in places like that, the more we see.
Yeah.
In Nauset, we've probably seen the most tropical fish diversity in recent years. But again, you know, I'd love to see what Pleasant Bay has now 10 years later. It'd be really interesting to see.
I've seen yellow tangs in Town Cove. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yep.
We had, was it the blue angelfish in Wellfleet Harbor? And I think we had an African pompano last year too. But yeah, cool stuff.
I caught a redfish, channel bass at P-Town one night squid fishing. That was pretty cool. Like about
That is really cool.
5 pounder, like, took it home. Yeah. It's awesome.
Oh, and do you do any work in like Nantucket Sound as you get into the warmer water down there?
Yeah, we are doing some projects down there. We're not doing anything kind of like this in anywhere around Nantucket Sound right now, but I think we'd be interested in working in some of those systems too.
Oh, those ponds would be loaded with great stuff.
Yeah, no, I know the Division of Marine Fisheries does some seine sampling down there. There's certainly studies being done, but yeah, we'd love to kind of take what we're doing in some of these systems and go north and south with it.
Sure.
We do collect a lot of data from Nantucket Sound, looking at water temperature, things like that. We worked with the weir fishermen down there for 20 years or so, just about. And if anybody takes that up again, we'll keep working with them down there. Because that's a really great way to look at biodiversity.
I guess the reason I ask is, something like the green crab, is that, in terms of their range, do they have just as big a problem south of us as we're starting to encounter here? Or, are they managed by some of these more predatory fish that forage on these crabs?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think about places to the southern where I've heard of projects like really focused on green crabs because they've become a nuisance. I think it seems to be a phenomenon that's sort of spreading south. When we saw the soft shell clam fishery in Maine really get wiped out, green crabs were the most likely culprit there. And then now there's a big interest in New Hampshire, and now North Shore kind of making its way down here. So I think that sort of follows what shell fishermen are telling folks as far as what to focus on. But yeah, I'm not sure about south of Cape Cod. I'm trying to think of places where that's been identified. They're certainly everywhere. But Rhode Island
is plagued with them too.
Yeah, there you go. So Rhode Island.
I know a lot of the crabs that are caught here in Massachusetts, certainly on Cape Cod, that go for the bait, fishery, the bait market. They go south to Jersey and New York and, places where they really want it for bait. Because maybe they don't have enough, I guess. Or
Yeah, maybe not.
no fiddlers, whatever, but
Send them all
they
down.
want, they want the greens, so,
Yeah, great tog bait.
yeah. Low oxygen, mostly in ponds or
So-
even in the open bay?
We noticed it, or evidence of low oxygen in some of the coastal ponds. I think Crow's Pond in particular was one of the spots. And that's also, if you look at the Pleasant Bay Alliance's water quality data, that was one of the spots that had the lowest oxygen as well.
Yeah.
That said, I think, hearing from folks who used to cohog out there, there's places now where the sediment just seems like it's just really, anoxic. It's got that kind of black consistency, even if it's not that fine, silty mayonnaise custard texture. It is anoxic, and it's often under mats of either macroalgae or things like tunicates, little sea squirts.
Sea lettuce?
Yep, sea lettuce in particular, but also the little, they look like little jelly balls, little sea squirts.
Yeah.
They make those big mats. It's like what we see in Town Cove too. So I'm kind of interested, and again, that came from things I heard in these meetings. There's interest in looking at, what happens to that bottom if you turn some of it over, So for us, this could be a way to get some baseline data, look at, okay, well, what is the oxygen concentration in these places? We want to try to look at sediment oxygen as well, and take some sediment samples and see if the oxygen is very low, like immediately at the water sediment interface or below it as well. When we went out there and did that dredge survey a decade ago, we did find a number of sort of dinosaur cohogs, these big old blunts. But it'd be interesting to see what kind of habitat they're actually still living in.
You just mentioned turning over. So that's something I've been, talked about for years anyway. Is it advantageous, would it be advantageous to take a crappy bottom, like a mayonnaise bottom, and get in there and go down a foot or so and try to get that just turned over, and maybe, can you revitalize that kind of thing, or is it just gone once it's
I'm
gone?
not sure. I think, there's a lot of sort of common sense logic that I hear from fishermen in particular who spend a lot of time out there, that suggests that would be the case. I'm going into it not knowing, and thinking, okay, well, how could we measure that effect, and what are we changing when we do that,
I imagine it would take years.
I honestly don't know. That's my instinct is it wouldn't happen overnight, although you do often see very fast changes in some species of diversity. The this is an aside, but just, one of the things that we're interested in looking at when we go back out there, when we were out there in 15, 16, and 17, that's when they were doing the restoration work at Muddy Creek. And just by serendipity, we were sampling off of the creek before the restoration, during the restoration, and immediately afterwards. And that's a really small data set. You can't say a whole lot about that, but it is really interesting to note, we saw a huge change in fish diversity before and after. And again, that could have just been, an artifact of what we were doing for sampling, but it was probably the highest species diversity we had, certainly in that area immediately after they opened that up. So it'll be interesting to go back and see if that's true. But that just reminded me, thinking about the time scale of these kinds of effects. You see measurable effects of habitat restoration sometimes not for a long time, and other times, you might notice an almost instant change in things like fish communities in particular. I think those are a good metric in some ways. Even though they're mobile, they don't necessarily live there year round, but they can be an indicator of what's going on in the system that you notice relatively quickly changing.
Interesting.
Well, I wouldn't be interested in just seeing some core samples of some of these anoxic spots, just so we have a better understanding of how deep it actually go. I mean, it might not even be practical because it's, multiple feet deep of black mayonnaise, but, we don't really know how deep these layers go and if there's any change underneath of that.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. And, like you, I'm not sure exactly how we do it. I started after that was brought up in one of these meetings, I started hunting around and talking to other folks. There are ways of certainly taking core samples. But what the thing, again, is really interesting from my perspective is to try to look at the oxygen in the sediment and can you get a reliable sample down through. There's ways of doing it. I want to try to come up with a way that's a little simpler, but.
I know, boy. In the archaeology world, there's a T. You get a piece of tubing, stainless tubing, make a T handle out of it, make it about, it's 12, 14 inches long, 18 inches long. And the very end of the tube has a edge cut on it, like a knife edge cut onto it, ground onto it. And then if your tube is, say, 18 inches long, 20 inches long, starting about 2 or 3 inches up, there's a slot that's cut into it. They just hollow it out. So now you have like 3/4 of the pipe with 1/4 of it taken away. And it's just a big removal. This is a slot taken out. You take the pipe, you put it in the ground, spin it around, pull it out, and you take a mason's trowel and you scrape that edge, and you have a complete profile of what you see from the ground, from the duff right down to the, peak horizon. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
And if you're on a site, if you have shell, you have whatever you have, it's pretty neat. But I would imagine you can do the same thing in the ocean bottom.
Yeah, and we do. The trick is just getting a reliable oxygen measurement out of that because
there would be no
dissipates so
oxygen, but at
quickly.
least you'd see a profile. of what you have
Absolutely.
for,
No, we should just do that. My cousin Steve Swain built us a special core just for getting black mayo out of Wellfleet Harbor. So if we can get it out of there, we can get it out of anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited for you to come back.
I'm excited
It's
to be back.
important to, not wait as long as we have, and especially with how things are changing so aggressively.
Mhm.
We want you back on the regular, so whatever you need to continue, this kind of schedule of revisiting, Town of Orleans wants to support you, so, but we also need a heads up kind of for planning and budgeting, so if you need support moving forward, give me a
Awesome.
call, okay?
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. The logistical support of just that you all provide out there is invaluable also. So we appreciate that. And I think what we hope is when we compare the data we have now from this study, from what we took 10 years ago, and incorporate some of the questions we've gotten from folks like you, from the workshops we've had, we can really come up with a framework for long-term monitoring that we can present to you, to the towns around the bay, to the Alliance, to the other parties involved, and say, here's what we think we should be looking at. We should do this every, this thing every year, this thing every 5 years, some of these different things, and have something that we can use to compare and look at change. Because you're absolutely right. There's such value in that long-term data. And a lot of times we don't have it. We have a snapshot from 50 years ago. We have one from a decade ago. It's really hard. If we didn't have the knowledge of folks like you all who work out there more than we do, it would be really, really hard to interpret those two data points. As it is, it's tough to defend when we do interpret the changes from 50 years ago. But at least we have that body of knowledge that you all have to help us. But it'd be nice to have some numbers to go with it too. So
It's
that's
the
the goal
second
going
time.
forward.
Second time tonight you mentioned that certain things would need more frequent study, and certain things would be less frequent. What would you think would be more frequent?
Well, there are things that change, really, really fast. Just off the top of my head, I mean, things, and there are also things that, that maybe they don't change super fast, but they're easy to measure, so why not? But, certainly there's a lot of interannual variability in things like water temperature, fish distribution, things like that. That changes on a daily cycle, let alone, an interannual cycle. So I think things like that, where you have mobile species, you have things that change their distribution rapidly. I think those things you want to measure more frequently, and maybe you don't have to do it everywhere all the time, but certain standardized ways of doing it can be repeated, regularly in some of these places. I will say too, with some of these things that you can monitor more frequently, a lot of the sampling methods that we do, we've tried to make them as simple and replicable as possible, like seining, setting the eel traps. Those are things students can do. We partner with Pleasant Bay Community Boating. They've got a wonderful education program there, and their staff know how to use some of our sampling methods. And it's kind of our goal both to work with students in places like that and with the schools, but also set folks up with these sampling tools so they can help collect that long-term data. Science funding is great. We're really grateful to the Friends of Pleasant Bay and to the towns for their support. We'll certainly be grateful for support from the town of Orleans for this future work here, if it comes to that. But also, it is, we have a wonderful opportunity to get students involved in the work. It's difficult to run a systematic sampling program year round, but you can certainly get students out there all summer long measuring some of these things at really high temporal resolution. Doing it very frequently over time. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It doesn't just have to be the scientists going out there and collecting the data going forward. And we want to be able to hand some of this stuff over to say, here are things that we all can be doing out there as long as we do it in this relatively systematic way. So yeah, there's a lot of future opportunity there.
I have a request. I'd be interested in knowing the depth of age classes of cohogs throughout the year. So we're doing a mortality study right now on seed cohogs. And, it seems like the standardized way of doing it is, it's like a 5-inch deep tray, covered or uncovered, whatever you choose. But I have concerns that it might not be deep enough. And I want to, and I've heard stories where, you plant a ton of seed, you go back, you can't find anything, and 2 years later, all the seed, the place is just bustling with cohogs from the seed you planted. So do they go deeper than we think to deal with the cold winter, and what age classes are able to go to those depths, and, whether the seed stays on top, that type of thing. I don't know if you could, try to document that or try to quantify if it's actually, but like kind of a layering way of recording it?
Yeah, let's talk after this because, we'll follow up by email, because, I think that's something I'd like to talk to you about for a little bit of time and just think about, because I know I'm familiar with generally the methods that you're probably using now, what Josh and the cooperative extension folks have used.
Same, yeah.
So kind of extending that, literally going deeper, but.
Well, just for you, if you guys are doing samplings, kind of document, try to figure out at what depth are you finding these age classes, and more so summer compared to winter.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we could easily sort of sieve at discrete depths, and that's Let me noodle on that a little bit, but yeah, I think we could do that, and it would be helpful to kind of do it in a way that's also consistent with some of the other work that's being done, so we can compare as much as we can. Obviously we'd be going deeper, but get your apples to apples.
And anecdotally, I think we can all agree they go deeper in the winter.
But they move too.
Yeah.
I mean, they zip right along.
Sure, but if not, if we have them in a contained.
Well, I'm thinking if it's maybe in wintertime, if they may move offshore to avoid colder water. I mean, they can move pretty far.
Do they
I don't know.
go out
I
from
was
under the
I was
box?
working at- Huh?
Do they go out from under the edge of the box?
Not if we put it deep
No,
enough.
no. But I mean, so I worked a Quahog Grant in Wellfleet, and you could sit there and watch them just go around in circles on the sand. They obviously move around. I mean, they're like speed of a snail, but they certainly move. So maybe they do to avoid cold. Who knows? Let's see. Oh, as you heard, we're hoping to put together a plan and hopefully a some kind of dredge project in Pleasant Bay. Would that be something you'd be interested in doing a before and after kind of thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's timely if there's things that we can look at that, if the timing works out such that we could get data that would be useful for that process. Certainly we have information like, seasonality of winter flounder in Pleasant Bay, and we'll be getting that again now. I know the state's interested in time of year restrictions and, updating those to match what we see now versus when the TOIs were written however many years ago. So that could be an opportunity. We'll be contributing information to that process in general that way. But if there's things specifically, that we can focus on that help answer questions for you all, we'll do our best to weave those in.
Just thought I'd throw it out there, I don't really know, so. Yeah. That's all I have.
What's your kid's name?
Ryland Fox Nichols.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We brought him down to Pleasant Bay for the first time a few weeks ago. He likes it so far, I think. We haven't put him in it yet, but soon.
Don't surprise me.
Soon.
He's gonna take him razoring. He's got a buggy.
Oh, yeah.
With wheelies on it. He's gonna get 2 spray rigs. I'm gonna go razoring in
Yep.
Cape Cod Bay.
Stack the father-son permits up on the buggy, big doings.
Good for you. Teach him young.
Nice to see you. It's been a long time.
Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Is that it?
Let the father go home.
Thanks, Owen. Really appreciate you coming.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
for
Yeah,
the
please reach out if you have any more questions, ideas. We'll talk cohogs and what have you. I'm assuming I can just unplug here. So.
Great.
In the wintertime, there's a chance that maybe they get sanded in, but since their respiration rates are so much slower in the winter, they're not suffocating and dying, they're kind of in a hibernation mode. So maybe they're not digging down deeper, they're just getting buried and not dying. You understand?
Yeah, I think
that's
I
interesting.
understand. It makes sense. And the sediment goes on top. So
That's what I do.
you know,
But then so often with the freeze, they all
Like-
pop up too.
yeah. So much to learn.
Let us know when you come out.
Almost hibernated tonight. Thanks, Owen.
Thank you,
Okay.
Owen.
Next agenda item, Celebrate Our Water is June 20th, 2026, participation discussion. I did put a request out via email to the committee, and at our last meeting in March, I did ask for any kind of volunteers. I heard nothing. But we've been invited to have a table at the Celebrate Our Waters. 2 questions. Do we want to do it? And if so, can I get some help? Phil, do you mind coming up to the podium and telling us what happened last year and what your experience was? I know, Kyle, you helped, right? Yes. Okay. Maybe the 2 of you can just tell us what to expect at such an event.
No, I don't mind, and in fact, I'll admit I was asked Craig to put it back on the agenda because I don't think we had much of a discussion. I understand, because this happened last year too, when Orleans Pond Coalition came and talked about this idea, and it was in June, where they'd never had something like this before. We're a committee where one person on our committee is retired and everybody else is working. And most of us were working on the waterfront in June. 3rd week in June is like the busiest time of year. So people were saying, I can't do it, time-wise. Most of the other committees in this town are comprised of retired people, so they don't necessarily think of those kind of time constraints. On the other hand, I thought it was a good idea for us to take part in because of the subject matter that we're all so involved with. So Kyle and I pulled together a display last year, and basically they give every exhibitor a table. And so we had a table with shells, and it was real simple. I had like an old shallow desk drawer that I lined with burlap and put some shells in there, and had a couple other displays on flat baskets, focused on shells that people, the shellfish that people can dig right here, like, clams and quahogs and oysters and scallops. Had one little tray with a bunch of other shells. Also had a poster about pests and predators, and had some shells that showed damage, so we could talk about, what snails do and what borings, sponge does and stuff like that. And then Craig had made a suggestion years ago when he was on the board of the Fishermen's Alliance. They had a fish tank that was part of their thing at Wellfleet Oyster Fest, and he just talked about what a big hit it was. So we got a fish tote, put in some sand, some water, and had some clams and quahogs and a couple little kiddie beach toys so that they could dig them. And I tied to the handles a couple of gauges so they could measure and learn how to do it. And then we also had implements. Kyle built us a frame, which he donated to the department. Also designed and paid for a banner, but we took cable ties and put a bunch of rakes. Let's see what else. We had a suitcase oyster bag, a spat bag, little piece of quahog net, things like that on the display. We didn't want people coming over and picking up and swinging around, that kind of thing. So we wanted it to just be there and have somebody to talk about it. Last year there was not a lot of traffic, although we did have some kids that played in the little pool. But it was also kind of a drizzly day, and I think they're doing a heck of a lot more advertising this year. In fact, the theme this year is basically creatures that we want to take care of and preserve around here. And John Dugan told me that it was based on our little tank. So I was asked to maybe lay out the tasks that are needed so we could break it down and not have people have to commit 3 or 4 hours a day. I forgot to mention, John also lent us a lobster trap, which we put there, and we had like a clam basket on it and a couple of larger things that weren't tied to the frame. Most of the stuff is done already, to be honest with you. We could use the same tray and baskets and shells, and for that we just need to make a couple of little signs. Bend a piece of cardboard and write on it quahog shell. I mean, it's that's 15 minutes. With the rack, I told Craig it'd be really nice to have. I don't know what you call your oyster containers, but something besides just a flat bag, have a little bit more and have a little bit more about aquaculture. We had one poster about aquaculture, but the more we could teach people a little bit what it is and what it's about, I think would be good. Years ago, OPC, in fact, I ended up participating in, that's when I met Jerry Burge and talked to him about coming to the committee. They actually went out and talked to people that were at their grants off of Skakit. But they're not doing it this year. They're having it under a tent and having people come in, so it's more of a display thing. If we did it and had the shellfish tank, and also there was a suggestion about maybe a little fish tank, and I have a 30-gallon aquarium. I used to have a sea aquarium with a top on it. All we would need is a battery-operated aerator, and we could throw a few fish in there. But people would have to get the sand, get some water, collect the animals. I did all that last year, and it was a lot of running around the night before and that morning, and I didn't even have time to get the shellfish. I went to the store and bought them. And then I couldn't carry the 5-gallon jugs, so I had jugs in my car, and luckily Kyle was there to bring them over from my truck and bring them over to the display. We have a couple hours to set up before anybody comes. That's not the problem. It's just getting all this stuff together and then having 2 or 3 people there to talk to the people who come by. So that's what I guess I'm asking if people, I'm willing to be one of the people, but I think we need a couple more people there. I'm willing to pull together a lot of the stuff, but we would also need people to get sand, get water, get some of the animals, and put it together. So I don't know if anybody has questions or comments or what.
I'm planning on being there.
Excellent.
So I can bring the water, I can bring a tote without holes in it, I can bring some sand, I can bring some oysters. I can't guarantee steamers or cogs.
I can grab some out of my projects.
Oh, okay, and you have.
Well, last year, one of the problems we had was we had red tide, which who knows if we will. So I couldn't go dig any here, and I just didn't have time to dig any in Chatham. I have a resident, a family permit over there.
Right, right.
I've got mussels, cohogs, steamers, all in my part of my farm.
Something else. I don't mind talking about that kind of stuff, so there's two of us. Anybody else?
I'll
I-
certainly help, but if I'm requested to be at
Yep.
my schedule, I can't.
Well, we also don't have to have somebody there the entire time. I mean, if somebody could even just come by for an hour, that would help. But a lot of it would be like the day before, getting all this stuff together,
I could bring,
and that
I
morning.
could
I
bring,
can help you with some of that too.
Excellent. I think we got enough.
I could bring a cage, I can bring a bag, I can bring a flat bag, an open bag, let's.
And we don't have to go too wild. We also don't want any damage to any of the stuff that anybody brings or anything like that. That's one reason we need to have people there.
Might be good to explain, to have the aquaculture gear, so when people are out on the flats, they know what it is.
Right, and that was part of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Implements of destruction, a jerk rake, a bump rake, a bull rake, I can bring a lot of stuff, I have all that.
So does it sound like we maybe have enough to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, three's fine.
Okay, so maybe the four of us could talk. I mean, it's not for another month, but I mean, we could
Right.
talk a little bit more about the details, and this would be in the name of the committee. One thing I had last year was a copy of our charge, and I thought this year, let's also have a copy of what Craig wrote for the annual report about what we did last year, because that talks about some of the things that we worked on. And that might make more sense than just the charge, but we're allowed to have, pamphlets or stuff like that on the table.
Can we put photos together in the pamphlets? Sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of it depends on how much time and energy we have to pull something together. It's one of those 3x6 tables, plus we had the other stuff outside.
Yeah, I have extra tables, if we can bring an extra table, I have 4 tables.
Well, he's got a whole number of, people that are coming, so we have to coordinate with John on that. But we're definitely guaranteed a table and a tablecloth, and then last year we used some space on the outside, and I think they really would like us to participate, so he would be accommodating to us. So sounds like a go?
Yep, I have the pump, I have an aerator, battery aerator.
Excellent.
If not, I need one anyway, so I can do goose hummock, I think $15 to goose hummock, so I can grab one. Get some batteries.
Well,
30
it's possible to have electricity arranged, but we have to communicate with John Dugan in advance. We can't just wait till the last minute on that.
It's a battery operated, it's a bait well, area.
Okay.
Yeah,
30 gallons might be more than you need. That's a lot, that's a big tank.
Like this?
30 gallon.
You know what? It's a 20. It's a 20.
20?
Yeah. Okay. If anybody else can think anything or has questions, contact Craig, or if you want direct people to me, that's fine too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, item number 7. Nate, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Nate Sears, Natural Resources. Update. Pilgrim Lake Herring Run Improvement Project. We are nearing 30% design, which is kind of the trigger for beginning pursuing permitting. Our next meeting will be with Brad Chase, Division of Marine Fisheries, for him to review really the alternatives that are being brought forward. Once we have Brad review that, then we'll bring in, I think, you kind of have some citizen input, specifically the neighbors. What it looks like at this point, I think, which I envision, is that, right now we have a technical section of the fishway. It's from Lonnie's Pond through the culvert, up the up the fish ladder, and kind of where it ends at the counting station by Scott Johnson's, and then it goes into more of a natural creek-like system until you get into the
Headwall.
pen board system that goes into the lake. Looking at flow rates, groundwater, lake level, water availability, you gotta take that all into account. There's definitely gonna be dredging involved. When I say dredging, probably, and there's also just, it's limited by means and methods, right? So like, there's only some certain things we can get away with doing in there. When I say get away with, meaning, you know, staying on town property, which is basically the width of the run.
Are those the pink flags at the extent of the property?
No, not necessarily. Those might be wetlands delineation, maybe. Access, right? So just getting machinery in there and then trying not to make a huge mess and leaving, you know, the natural system as natural as it was when we found it, but repairing what we need to repair. So when I see the technical section of the Fishway, and you guys, we'll be bringing more detailed versions of this, but from the last meeting that we had, they're planning on using only 8 boxes in the Fishway compared to like
8 steps
8 steps.
versus the 15, 20 that are there now?
Yeah, like probably over 20 of them.
Yeah.
And then the tough part was, what do you do when you get out of those 8 steps? And we've been relying on, you know, a concrete chute, basically, with, you know, over 20 steps to get all the way to the counting bridge. Well, they were proposing the thought of needing to excavate down to the level that we need for the pitch to get us the amount of water, but also get the flow that we needed, because there's certain sections in the run right now that are significant stretches where it's flat. There's 0 decline. The water is flowing only because there's other sections in there that are, you know, creating the momentum of it. My thought is that regardless of whether we're doing 8 steps or not, that probably the easiest way to do that is go in there with a mini excavator, creep in where you have access, and then dredge your way out, staying kind of within the footprint of what is in the technical Fishway now, creating the 8 boxes that they need, but they, you know, we went over and over how you're gonna get the depth in that kind of riparian area without the profile continuing just to erode into it. So, you know, they were proposing that we excavate, but we were getting outside of the footprint of what the town-owned property is, and we'd be looking at all sorts of, you know, legal issues with long-term, you know, securement of that property for maintenance and, you know, not just the construction of it. So the thought is that we do the 8 boxes and then we just line the sides. Instead of having boxes, we'll still continue that as, just like they did when they built it in the 20s, with just concrete walls going up with a naturalized bottom until you get to where it widens out at the counting bridge. And at the counting bridge, they narrow it down with, you know, some type of naturalized solution like fiber rolls planted with native vegetation. But what's just happened is it's just widened and widened and widened over time. And, you know, we're spreading the water out when we need to condense the amount of water into a narrower chute. So that part's actually easier. So I think it's gonna be a 2-part system once again. It'll be technical, just like it is now with, you know, the use of concrete. I'm guessing that we would probably do it precast, where you just have precast sections that you set in there just to hold the walls back.
8 steps?
No, the 8 steps will be proper steps like you see now, and then within the footprint of where the technical Fishway is now, it'll just be walled. There won't be steps. So you're just following the pitch of the ground. And it'll be dredged to that depth that's needed.
I
So
thought that,
like a business-only runway?
Yeah,
and then
business
a
only.
natural whatever next to it or something?
Yeah, they don't have to go up any whoop-de-doos to get through it. It's just holding the banks back so that we don't have to excavate expansively to create the depth needed without being vulnerable to future erosion. So we're just taking in kind what's in there,
dredging it down, and then replacing it with probably precast walls to hold it back.
I thought it was like precast boxes as the steps that you would place on top, just like you place a concrete step on top of each other to create a stairway.
We will, but there's only gonna be,
Would the box create a support for the sides too?
yeah, but there's only 8 of those from the same size as they
Yeah.
are now, starting at the culvert. So from here to the window, you'd have 8 boxes. And then from there, we still have a footprint that we need to maintain. So we would just, instead of having boxes, we'd just go with the prefab, but just concrete walls. So it's just a straight chute. They don't have to go up anything. Brad's gotta look at the plan. We have a culvert plan. That's all gonna be torn up, that bridge that's there now, and, I think it looks good. The thing is, that, you have to kind of rein the engineers back in, because they're not intimate with the site, right? And trying to get them to understand there's limitations of what we're trying to achieve here. We're not trying, Scott always told me, you don't need to change it, you just need to fix it. It worked for 100 years.
So would that bridge disappear and be replaced by another one?
Yes.
Because that's a huge
We
stumbling
gotta
block.
lower the culvert way down. That was one of
That's
the
a huge
major
stumbling
flaws.
block to get the machine in and out of there, because that's the place you have to get the machine in and out.
No, we can get the machine in up the lake.
Oh.
Dump it right in the run, and we're gonna go the whole length of the run with that machine, working our way out.
Oh, okay.
Looks good on paper.
It's a dredge machine?
Huh?
It's a dredge machine? It's a,
No, it'll be a mini excavator, I'm guessing, right? Smallest machine you can
Yeah,
get, where you
okay.
just, scoop at a time. The width of the bucket is almost the width of what we're proposing for the channel.
gotcha, okay. Oh. Including, up current of the,
Yes,
flow of the steps.
towards Pilgrim Lake, you're
Okay,
saying?
yeah, the straight run, huh?
Yeah, narrow it up.
Yeah, well, it'll definitely include the,
So 30% design means Brad Chase reviews the information, throws his input towards whether, what's the most ideal situation for the herring, and whether he thinks it's good. Then we gotta go through all the permitting, including local conscom, and we'll have alternatives that may be, we're gonna have to argue why we chose the alternative that we did, understanding that there's probably more naturalized approaches to it, but the means and methods and the limitations of what we can actually accomplish in there are directing us towards doing it this way, right? No one wants a concrete chute, but there's been a concrete chute there for 100 years.
Yeah.
And probably the easiest way to go in there and not screw the whole place up and get into other people's property is just to replace in kind what was there, what worked.
even if we got into other people's property, wouldn't there be enough backfill that you could come back, so you
In
disturb
order
it
to do that, they were
temporarily?
talking gabion cages,
Okay.
state bank stabilization, and that's when I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. we're
Oh,
not-
no, I mean permanently, I mean, couldn't you, if you had to temporarily go through someone's property with a dredge?
Oh, that's nothing. I mean, that's,
Okay,
we're
then
gonna be,
you can always backfill that.
we're gonna be asking for the access, right?
Yeah.
Small places to jump in and feed pieces of concrete. that
Yeah,
type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
What we don't wanna do is turn, a creek that this wide, going through
No.
between people's yards and making it this wide.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So that it doesn't erode.
Yeah.
Rock Harbor, starting to look like something, the devil's in the details at this point. I'm down there every day, basically just pointing out everything that can't be left as a future problem. Seems like we accomplish one thing and we go, one step forward, 2 steps back. Buddy's down there with me every day. But as painful as it's been over the last 2 years, we're starting to see some people that, we're getting positive feedback finally. People are smiling, including, the fishermen, the visitors, and we can see,
Lots of compliments, lots of compliments.
Buddy's down there more than I am, so,
I heard some complaints about the cleats.
well,
The cruise ship line cleats, like, oh my God.
you're talking to the wrong guy, because
I'm just saying, it was just kind of
I
funny,
see,
but
my problem is because.
Can't even
I've
time
been,
to the thing, it's
you
too
know,
fucking big.
From start to finish, from the design of every certain component, I go down there and all I see is everything that's wrong. But
Yeah,
to the general
that's your job.
public.
Good, that's your
you know,
job.
They don't see that, right? It's like, when you're building your house and you remember everything that went wrong, but no one ever notices any of that stuff, so. But I'm staying on them. We're not gonna let them walk away until every one of these things, because a lot of them, it's selfishly, I don't wanna inherit a future problem, so.
That's not selfish.
But we also have, we're coming into Memorial Day, here it is, that went by fast, so, but I'm gonna hold them to the fire regardless of whether we go into, mid-June here.
I see Bobby Hours down there, huh?
No, John Martin.
Oh, no, I saw Bobby Hours.
Go down and see it for yourself. It's very, very,
Was it the
very
other day?
nice.
I saw you 2 days ago, remember?
And the boats are filling in the harbor, so the places, in the Bass are just outside the harbor, so, it's an
We
active
used
place
to-
at the moment. Quahog boats are coming in,
Used the fuel
offloading.
dock for the first time today, and everything is, it's a learning experience, but it's just fine.
Good.
Good. You got anything to add, Bud?
No,
Come on.
it's fine.
Buddy's back to work.
One day at a
He's
time,
back to work down there, so,
one day at a time.
He's watering the
I
flowers.
haven't seen a step backwards as in the past, but we seem to be progressing
yeah,
daily.
yeah.
It's a challenge, but we're progressing.
Yeah, yeah. But even Buddy's getting more positive by the day, so I know that we must be getting somewhere. Yep.
That's never happened.
The over sand beaches, Nauset South, still open. Most of Orleans is tore up pretty good. There's some sections at 1, a little bit at 5, but, Chatham's got all the sand right now. And I'm sure that it's just, but it's expansive in Chatham, which is good. We can, put a lot of vehicles out there. We'll keep it open, and the southwest winds will start building up our beach. Most likely get through towards the end of May, beginning of June, somewhere around there. We're gonna be closing it down to unfledged plovers near the trail, so enjoy it while you can. Doesn't look like the weekend will be great, but get out there when you can, because, that closure usually lasts till mid-July. Calanans Pass, the north side, optimistic that I'll get that open. Looking at some tides here, the 2 tides in June make me a little nervous, but in the near future, I plan on opening that back up. Public beaches, we start charging on the weekends this Saturday. We're fully staffed. There's somewhere close to 70 seasonal employees working, underneath me here. We've got all of them hired, and, we're putting the schedules together. Full complement of lifeguards. They'll start open ocean water rescue training this weekend and begin guarding full-time on the 19th. So there's that level of training and, certifications that we need to put in place prior to them even starting the season for these lifeguards. And it's a short season, so you can, you put 3 weeks in the training before you even start the season. And, if you start the season on July 1, basically, and it's a 2-month season. But it sure seems longer when you're in the middle of it.
That's right.
Goose Hummock Bulkhead is complete, so go down, lay your eyes on that. Bobby Hour did that job, and what a pleasure to work with. Yeah, that company did a great job, and they didn't leave anything behind that left me concerned. We worked with Phil Harworth next door at Goose Hummock, and we were able to make sure that he was satisfied at the end as well. So he has a bulkhead to tie into, and any disruption that we occurred on his property, we put back, if not better condition. So that project was a success. I'm hoping that the Port Inimica bulkhead dredge project that, will come in my time goes as smoothly as that one. Port Inimica Landing, the dredge project coming out of Pawa. Last time we spoke, the county was going to go there and do some pre-bathymetry for me. I haven't seen that yet. I'm hoping that I get that soon, but I have reached out to engineering consultant for a quote for putting together kind of a scope of work, design, and permitting that, for something that's actually permittable to do there. Once I get that, we'll have a number of what we need to do to put it in the budget so that we can move forward, at least securing the money for permitting that project. And then from there, then the next step would be to go out to bid. But we can't go out to bid until we know means and methods for how we would actually dredge it, and what we would use for equipment. So that's still, in line. Red Tide, both water bodies right now. It closed the river on the Pleasant Bay side on March 11th because of ridiculously high cell counts in the water column. meets in in Aries Pond came back above threshold, so that was what led to, that staying closed longer. And then on May 6th, the remainder of Pleasant Bay closed as a precautionary closure because of cell counts in Orleans, Harwich, and Chatham, and they also came back with soft shell that were tested hot out of Jackknife Cove in Chatham. So that closed, but they left it open for cohogs.
Why is that?
Why
Why is that?
It's similar why they use mussels as an indicator for red tide, because they pick it up that much faster and they'll accumulate it that much faster. So it's kind of like the first red flag of the situation that the shellfish are feeding on the plankton, the algae. I've never seen that before, but that tells me that it's super precautionary closure, because they're only indicating that they don't want you harvesting the most sensitive of the shellfish.
It did happen, I think it was 2008 or 2007,
Yeah.
when the whole, pretty much northeastern seaboard was shut down. When they opened Nauset back up, they opened it to everything but steamers.
Everything but steamers.
Yeah, we couldn't dig steamers till about mid-August.
Probably mussels as well, I'm guessing.
No, mussels was open that year.
Isn't that something?
That was a long time ago, but,
Yeah.
I think the science has changed since then, but,
Yeah.
so it has happened once before.
That was a freak year anyway. That was a freak year anyway.
Yeah, it was.
It's tough for me because I need to articulate to the general public
Yeah.
what's open and what's closed. And it's like, we're open for this species over here, this is completely closed, the river's closed completely, but, draw the line across here. And it's not like we have a lot of a lot of steamers anyways, or soft shell, to be harvested on the Pleasant Bay side. So basically, we're closed. And we haven't got a clean sample back yet, so you need three clean samples in a row before we can reopen either side. The Skakit Beach Resiliency Management Plan was presented to the Select Board on April 15th. We hired the Woods Hole Group about a year and a half ago to look at, similar to what we did at Nauset, how we're managing Skakit Beach for coastal resiliency, seeing if those are the best management practices, and to see what we should be planning for in the long-term future, so that we can, have some of those mechanisms in place if needed, specifically permits. What came out of that basically is that, we're in pretty good shape, right? The elevation of Skakit Beach, specifically the parking lot and, the facilities are standing proud compared to, a lot of places in Orleans, meaning it's not low level. And it's gonna take a real serious storm to really compromise that location. But it also, the data showed that what we've been doing for the last 30 years by taking sand and putting it back on the beach every year to maintain a certain profile, is working. And as painful as it is to see when we bring in, coarser sediment, the coarser stuff is actually why we're in not bad shape over there. Because all the fines blow off in the winter, right? So, the biggest enemy of that place is that you go offshore and you start getting like fringing salt marsh, but on the sides. And then we have, a parking lot and a beach that doesn't have any dune, so it's just a wind tunnel. So in the winter time, it just blows all the fines right off that beach. But the coarse stuff sets up like cement. So it's not the best look come April, because the only thing left is all the really heavy grain stuff. But, what we've been doing is kind of capturing that sand with sand fencing, but also recovering it from the parking lot and stockpiling it, and then taking all the fines and putting it right back on the beach, kind of right before horseshoe crab season, which is, May 1. So I gotta put it back on in May 1. What came out of it is that we should probably start looking into expanding the footprint of my nourishment permit to allow intertidal nourishment, so that, we can put sand from dredging Rock Harbor out in front of the beach to kind of feed the monster, for lack of better words. And then it'll also give me beneficial reuse of the dredge spoils of when we dredge Rock Harbor, because the Army Corps is really tightening on anything that is compatible as far as the DEP is concerned for sand or, spoils, dredge spoils, has to be used for beneficial reuse. They won't let you, and historically, we were taking it out in scows and dropping it in the disposal sites in the middle of Cape Cod Bay, and they will not let us do that anymore. And that was really expensive, but it's also really way more expensive to truck it away, so.
Where do you store it?
And it also means that if we use this method and we put it in a rotation, we could, and it's not all compatible for beach nourishment, but certainly from the boat ramp out, not inner basin, you'll start getting into the organics, but kind of from the boat ramp out or in that general area, you're dealing with sand. It's beautiful sand. So we could bring the county in on a regular basis before all that sand moves into the inner basin, and you do it more regularly, not every 10 years. You do it every 2 to 3 years, and you have, instead of using, mechanical means of loading scows and using, excavators, which is a painful process, use the county and they hydraulically just pump it back up onto your beach as long as you have the permit. So, saves me money at Skakit, saves me money at Rock Harbor, so, I think, and then we're talking, what else is the problem that's going on at Skakit? Is that we don't have any delineation between asphalt and beach, similar to what we had at Nauset when we had the storms and the asphalt was just crumbling on the beach. I'm constantly dealing with that because I don't have any dune in front of that. So we're talking about potentially putting like a knee wall in. You can see them at other beaches. It's basically a timber framed, wall about the height of this table. Corporation, Red River Beach, West Dennis Beach. And then in front of that, and then using and then kind of delineating access for the public so that they're not, we're kind of, putting them in one location to minimize erosion, and then putting like a kind of a nominal dune in front of the wall and planting it with grass so it can naturally catch sand and kind of slow down the wind transported sand loss.
What happened to the, excuse me, what happened to the system of, excuse me, of using a front end loader out on the flats? They used it for years, and it was pretty successful. Going out, they go out a quarter mile, a third of a mile, however far out, and drag a bunch of the same sand off the flats and put it right back on the beach.
Sand mining is what they refer to it as.
They can't do it anymore?
No, Army Corps shut that down hard.
I asked the guy.
Yeah, that would be like gold now if I could do
Yeah,
that. Sticker office opened on May 12th, right after town meeting. All your stickers, beach stickers, transfer station stickers expire on June 30th. So get your stickers before June 30th. They used to expire earlier than that, so you still have the month of June, but don't wait until the last minute. You're gonna need this year, in the last few years, for, I think it's the $35, it's $35, a resident beach parking permit to park at the town landings, specific town landings. So that's the only sticker accepted at the town landings. And the landings that require those stickers, the timing is June 15th to September 15th, are Priscilla, Doane, Snow Shore, Tonsett, Mill Pond, River Road, Cove Road Landing, Port Nimicut, and Wildflower Lane. We do take, I do provide parking permits for our non-resident Eastham commercial shell fishermen if they're actively fishing, because we're reciprocal with our water bodies, and we certainly don't want to box out our neighbors from getting access to make a living.
Just suggest that to East End, too.
Well, we'll do us.
We'll do us.
All the channel markers are out. Rock Harbor trees are next. That's all I got.
That's plenty. Thank you very much. Any questions for Nate?
Has the Coast Guard decided to move the number 3 can off the Brewster Flats finally to where it should be? I understand it's still over there.
I don't know that. Well, I knew it was there, but I don't know if it's happened yet.
Okay.
I'm getting my Rock Harbor trees from Brewster, so, you know,
Don't
I'll
piss
be
'em
over
off.
there next week. I'll see you over there.
I get pictures of it in the ice, but
Yeah. Anybody else? None? All right. Agenda item number 8, future agenda items would be powwow dredge discussion, more red tide discussion, ocean quahog surf clam regulation changes, we were hoping Bob could talk about that, and fertilizer bylaw enforcement. Do you want to touch on that at all, John, or just,
No, it's pretty self-explanatory.
okay, all right. That's it for future agenda items. Does anybody else has something else for future agenda?
John, you know what I was thinking for the Celebrate Our Waters? Maybe you recommend this year, that next year, maybe the focus should be on fertilizers or some type of, you know, keeping our waters clean, and we could have, our group could represent a table and educate people about fertilizer.
It's a big starting point.
We
For
keep
water
talking about
quality.
education is the main component of this.
That's it. Motion to adjourn?
I make the motion.
John, second?
I'll second
All right, all in favor?
it. I
All right.
Aye.